My brother was 6 years younger than me, and I remember he had taken the job and started working for Gacy. He says, "Oh, Mom, me and this boy are working together and we're digging around Gacy's house." Well, it ended up they were digging their own graves.
Five of the most prolific serial killers in American history were all operating at the same time.
John Wayne Gacy's
Ted Bundy is still alive.
BTK.
Jeffrey Dahmer.
Green River Killer.
This was the golden age of serial killing.
My mother had told me that the only thing she ever prayed for herself was to die peacefully in her sleep. And that's the one thing she did not get.
3 months after the Otero murders, Dennis Rader decided he was going to kill again.
Now you have 5 homicides in Wichita, Kansas within a few months.
When John Gacy has his first kill, he recognizes the powerful arousal component of deciding whether they live or die. This is when Gacy crosses over.
He says, defended himself and killed him, buried him in the crawl space.
During the first half of 1974, there were a series of murders, about one a month. Ted Bundy's MO was to get women to trust him and go with him.
My husband told me, he said, Sue's missing and they can't find her. And I said, no, she's dead.
What sets this group of men apart is that they flew under law enforcement's radar for a long time. And in order to do that, these individuals have to come across as being fairly normal. To their neighbors and to people that knew them, you don't look like you're really scary and dangerous. And when you're not killing, you are sort of living a pro-social life. You're able to fly under the radar screen. Gacy was able to do it. Dahmer was able to do it. BTK was able to do it. Green River was able to do it. Bundy was able to do it. And when you have that combination, you could murder for years and years and not be caught.
Bundy was very careful in his planning of his crimes. He'd always taken a single female, but here's what happens with guys like Bundy. You have a success, and then you have another success, and then another, and then another. And pretty soon, you start to believe, I'm so far ahead of law enforcement that you start to believe you're invincible. And this is what I think happens at Lake Sammamish.
Lake Sammamish State Park, it's a lake and a park and a wonderful, beautiful place, particularly in the summertime in Seattle. Different witnesses saw Ted approach various young women. People saw that he had what appeared to be a cast on his arm and asked for some help with his sailboat. And people also observed Janice Ott leave with him.
Remember, this was an age of innocence. I think if the Lake Sammamish incidences happened today, the women would be very suspicious of, some stranger asking them to put a sailboat on top of a Volkswagen.
Bundy abducts her, takes her up about 2 miles away to a pre-selected location, and is there with her for maybe about 4 hours.
After he committed the first abduction successfully, and the police weren't on his tail, he felt like he could commit the second crime of the day. Denise Naslund, who was at the park with her boyfriend and some other friends, went to the restroom, and she was never seen again.
in broad daylight in a very densely populated public park. Ted Bundy abducted 2 victims and killed them. This is very brazen, very risky behavior. That risk of being caught must have been so intense, and that must have been something that he really craved. But it also might speak to his opinion of law enforcement. Well, they're never gonna catch me. They haven't so far. I can do whatever I want. So it might reflect both the thrill-seeking as well as his own grandiosity.
But with the disappearance of the Autumn and Naslin girls on the same day from the same state park came the first indications that a male subject was involved.
Leading up to Lake Sammamish, Bundy has already abducted and killed 5 women from around Seattle and an additional woman from nearby Oregon.
Lake Sammamish is outside the city limits of Seattle. So there was a task force set up between Seattle Police and King County Police. That's when I became involved in the investigation as a detective with the King County Police Department in Seattle, Washington. And I was assigned to investigate a series of homicides that had been occurring in Washington State.
That was a very innovative thing to bring together a group of law enforcement agencies to address the issue in an attempt to identify the offender.
They're going to start at the very beginning and go through every one of those Ted suspects we've got. This is what we're doing right now with this task force.
The name Ted came to our attention because one of the witnesses at the park overheard Ted introducing himself.
They also knew then that Ted drove a light-colored Volkswagen Bug.
Then the police had something to work with.
We went to the public and said, we need your help. We need any photographs that you took at the park that day. Witnesses, did anybody see these young women? The county police set up a hotline, and we received, over the next 2 weeks, over 1,000 leads.
Thank you very much for calling.
We did notify law enforcement throughout the western states that we were looking for someone named Ted, someone that drove a brown Volkswagen.
A composite picture was released to the news media.
It wasn't a great depiction of him, but it got the attention of a number of people, including Liz Kendall, his girlfriend.
Liz Kendall says, gosh, that sounds a lot like my boyfriend, and he's had some weird behavior in the past. I'm going to contact law enforcement.
The initial story in the paper after Lake Sammamish were that he drove a bronze Volkswagen, and her Ted didn't. Her Ted drove a very washed out, faded, tan Volkswagen. So she called to check to see about the color of the Volkswagen. And whoever she talked to said, no, it's bronze, it's bronze. So that kind of pacified her for a while. She eventually called back 2 or 3 more times.
No response from law enforcement. Law enforcement doesn't believe that a guy like Bundy fits what they think is their profile of a killer, and they dismiss it.
In the mid-70s, society in their mind had either this sort of Manson-like idea of what a killer would look like, or it would be a minority on drugs. But we weren't looking for people that were hiding in plain sight.
Ted Bundy was able to carry on a normal appearing life. He had a girlfriend.
He was a shaggy-haired college student.
Ted Bundy simply could walk the streets as a serial killer and nobody would say, ooh, that guy looks weird. He's the reason why young ladies would go to his car with him. He was smart, charismatic, good-looking. He was totally invisible for what he was.
Since the publication of the description of the man called Ted, there have been no further disappearances from this area. John Sandifer for ABC News in Seattle.
Ted left Seattle in 1974 in the fall, and he enrolled in law school in Salt Lake City.
Well, Ted Bundy definitely seemed to take an interest in paying attention to how police investigated crimes and intentionally committed crimes in different jurisdictions because he recognized that law enforcement wouldn't necessarily be able to connect the dots, or that they wouldn't be able to make the connections easily.
Bundy's tactic was moving around a lot. He just moved states and kept law enforcement guessing, and he actually killed 4 more women by the end of that year. He felt unstoppable.